So now let's go to the view page for one of the volunteers and look at that. We'll look at Andy Dufresne's volunteer page. So the volunteer view page shows all the information for a volunteer, shows all the information that they entered during their application, including the note to organizer that they might have left you, if it's there. It also shows you any custom information that you may have required them to enter as part of the volunteer application. There's another message button, which is just like the message button on the volunteers page that we just saw, which will again let you go to create a message that would be sent just to this volunteer. And there's also an edit button if you want to edit their volunteer application for some reason, such as maybe you need to change their phone number or something like that. Beneath this, there's a field for private notes. The volunteer does not see these notes, so you can enter a note about the volunteer. Andy likes to talk about beaches and boats. So the volunteer will not see these private notes. So below that is the list of shifts for which the volunteer has applied. This shows all the shifts for which they've applied, and will show them all regardless of status. So they can be scheduled, unscheduled, or declined, and it will just show all of them regardless of what their status is. You can also control the status of these shifts for the volunteer with these buttons on the right. The schedule button will set the volunteer to being scheduled and will inform them that they are now on the schedule for that shift via email. The decline button will just decline the shift for the volunteer. They don't get an email for that. And there's also, if the volunteer shift is in one of those two states, you can also set it back to unscheduled with the set to unscheduled button. Note that in this page you cannot see the complete information about any of the shifts. So for example, I can't see if Thursday shift, who is already scheduled, say for Thursday shift 2. I also can't see if there are still people needed for Thursday shift 2 at all. So it is probably better most of the time to use the schedule shift page to do your scheduling for a shift. Something else that you cannot do here, but you can do on the schedule shift page, is you can add a volunteer to a shift, in other words, for which they have not applied. So that is something you would need to do on the schedule shift page. But this is here for convenience if necessary. So I'm going to schedule Andy for Friday shift 3, and I'm going to schedule him for Saturday shift 2. Note that you can also enter an optional note for the shift status change to provide some context for the change if you want. This note will be added to the shift's log, which then you can see if you visit the page for the shift. Entries are also made to the shift log when you set a volunteer shift status to scheduled or set it from scheduled to something else. So in other words, whenever you add a volunteer to the schedule or remove a volunteer from the schedule. The volunteer is also alerted by email if you add them to the schedule or remove them from the schedule. So I'll add an optional note here and change the status. This shift is actually too late for Andy. Whoops. And then I'm going to set it to unscheduled. And we will look at the shift to see the log. So down here you can see the log entries that were generated by the activity we just did. So I scheduled Andy Dufresne, and then I removed him from the schedule and set him to unscheduled, and here's the note that I entered when I did that. So now we will go back to the volunteers page.